Imagine trying to have a love life when your parents sleep in the next room, your neighbors hear everything, your relatives visit without warning, and your entire village treats gossip like breaking news. Today, we are asking a direct question. How did ancient people actually deal with sex, romance, marriage, and desire? This is not a dirty story. It is history. But history, unfortunately for our dignity, is full of bodies, attraction, awkward families, fertility problems, bad medical advice, and people writing things on walls that they definitely should not have written. First, ancient people were not stiff statues with perfect posture and no emotions. They had crushes, they flirted, they got jealous, they wanted partners, they worried about pregnancy, they argued about marriage. They cheated, regretted it, bragged about it, and sometimes left evidence for archaeologists to find thousands of years later. The first big difference is privacy. Modern people imagine sex as private. In many ancient homes, privacy was a luxury. Houses could be crowded. Several generations lived together. Servants, enslaved workers, children, animals, and relatives might all share the same space. Walls were thin. Courtyards were shared. Doors were simple. And if your neighbor heard something strange at night, congratulations, by morning the whole street had a new podcast. So ancient intimacy often depended on timing, darkness, travel, festivals, or everyone politely pretending they noticed nothing. That does not mean people were shy all the time. In some cultures, people were very open in jokes, art, graffiti, and festival behavior. The Romans, for example, left graffiti in Pompeii that could be romantic, boastful, insulting, or extremely rude. Ancient walls were basically social media, except posting required a sharp tool and a lack of shame. Second, sex was tied to marriage, inheritance, and children. For many ancient societies, marriage was not just two people in love. It was a contract between families. It could decide property, land, social status, legitimate children, citizenship, and inheritance. In other words, ancient marriage was sometimes romance, sometimes business, and often a family meeting that somehow involved everyone except the two people who actually had to live together. In Mesopotamia, marriage agreements could be written on clay tablets. Imagine your relationship status being baked into mud and stored in an archive. Today someone says, "We made it official." Back then it was, "We made it official," and a scribe pressed it into wet clay. In ancient Egypt, women had more legal rights than in many ancient societies. They could own property, make contracts, divorce, and manage assets. Egyptian love poetry also shows real desire. People described longing, beauty, illness from love, and emotional obsession. Basically, ancient Egyptians invented the dramatic "why haven't they replied?" mood long before phones existed. In ancient Greece, marriage rules depended on city, class, and status. In Athens, citizen marriage focused heavily on legitimate heirs. Men often had more sexual freedom than women, and society judged behavior through status and gender. It was not fair, but it was common. Ancient sexual rules were often less about romance and more about controlling inheritance. Rome was similar in some ways. Roman society cared deeply about reputation. Marriage could be affectionate, but it was also legal and social. Adultery could become scandalous, especially among elites. Romans loved giving moral speeches about discipline, and then some of them behaved like the exact reason moral speeches had to be invented. Third, ancient people did have sexual desire, and they talked about it. They did not always talk about it the way we do, but they left evidence in poems, laws, medical texts, myths, jokes, magic spells, art, and court cases. Some evidence is direct. Some is coded. Some is written by elite men who were very confident and not always very helpful. Historians have to read carefully because ancient sources often tell us what powerful people wanted society to be, not what everyone actually did. Still, the pattern is clear. Sex was a normal part of life, but it was controlled by religion, law, gender roles, class, family pressure, and economic survival. Fourth, fertility was huge. In many ancient communities, having children was not just a personal choice. Children meant labor, heirs, care in old age, family continuity, and religious duty. A household without children could face social pressure. A king without an heir could cause political panic. A farmer without family labor could face real hardship. So people prayed for fertility. They wore amulets. They visited shrines. They used herbs. They followed medical advice. Some advice was practical. Some was nonsense, wearing a doctor's hat. Ancient medical writers tried to explain the body without microscopes, hormones, modern anatomy, antibiotics, or reliable pregnancy tests. They observed patterns, but they also mixed medicine with mythology. A text might offer useful advice about diet, then suddenly recommend something so strange that you can almost hear the ancient patient thinking, "Are we sure this man is licensed?" But contraception also existed. Ancient people did try to prevent pregnancy or space births. They used herbs, pessaries, timing, barriers, and charms. Some methods may have had partial effects. Some were probably useless. Some were dangerous. Ancient Egypt has medical papyri describing contraceptive mixtures. Greek and Roman writers discussed plants and methods. The famous plant silphium became so associated with reproduction and contraception that it appeared on coins from Cyrene. We do not know exactly how effective every method was, but the idea is simple. Ancient people knew children were important, and they also knew that having too many children at the wrong time could be a serious problem. In modern words, babies were blessings, but 11 blessings before harvest season might make someone stare quietly at the wall. Sex work also existed in many ancient cities, but it was not one simple story. Some sex workers were enslaved, some were poor and vulnerable, some were legally controlled. A small number of elite companions could become educated, visible, and influential. So we should not turn this into a costume joke and forget the power imbalance. Ancient societies often judged people very differently depending on gender and status. A powerful man might be excused for behavior that could ruin a woman or a lower status person. That double standard is ancient, durable, and extremely annoying. Religion also mattered. Sex was connected to fertility, crops, family lines, gods, and ritual purity. People prayed for children, used charms, asked gods for help with desire, and told myths full of divine romance, jealousy, pregnancy, and very bad decisions. Mythology is basically a family group chat where everyone has supernatural powers and no one has emotional regulation. But we should be careful. Older books sometimes exaggerated ancient temple sexuality. The safer answer is that sex and religion were often symbolically connected, but actual practices differed by place, time, class, and culture. Ancient people also joked about sex constantly. Greek comedy, Roman graffiti, songs, poems, and stories were full of awkward bodies, jealous spouses, boasting, cheating, marriage complaints, and rude humor. Wherever humans invented writing, someone eventually used it to embarrass themselves, and romantic love was real. Contracts and family pressure mattered, but poems, letters, tomb inscriptions, and stories showed tenderness. People missed lovers, praised beauty, mourned spouses, and wrote dramatic lines that sound surprisingly modern. So, how did ancient people actually handle sex and romance? With less privacy, more family pressure, more religion, more legal consequences, worse medical advice, stronger smells, fewer locks, and about the same amount of awkwardness. Someone liked someone. Someone's family had opinions. Someone worried about pregnancy. Someone prayed for help. Someone wrote something embarrassing on a wall. The tools changed. The apps arrived. The bedrooms got more private. But the human comedy stayed the same. Ancient sexuality was practical, sacred, funny, unfair, risky, emotional, and deeply human. In short, ancient people made rules for sex, myths about sex, jokes about sex, contracts around sex, prayers for sex, and then somehow still managed to make everything complicated.